Iulián, who worked not far away, saw the commotion at the door of his izba and went to meet them. He had already spoken with a professor from St. Petersburg when he arrived at the farm and found his visit strange. The children went to meet their father. Shouldn't they be studying? Semyon took the opportunity to praise him. Congratulations, Mr. Sumarokov. Your children are smart and intelligent. Thank you, Professor. But what brings you to our izba? The boys were talking about your daughter. I was interested in her condition, and I'm here to question her. I'm a scholar and researcher of the supernatural. Kadienka took advantage of Sumarokov's arrival to check on Mayra. She didn't want to be disturbed. Her fever had subsided, and she was sleeping peacefully. When Kadienka returned from the countryside, the professor's eyes fixed on her, awed by the girl's modest beauty, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by Iulián, who immediately tried to remove the elegant young man from his hut and his friend. He was too flirtatious, and Kadienka was simple and naive. He should continue courting Sonia, and not dare approach her. The students had already left, leaving the teacher. Semyon, before following them, turned to Kadienka. Kadia, I'll be back soon. How dare he call her that? They barely knew each other. What intimacy he sought in her home. The peasant grumbled to himself. Unconcerned about the social difference, he asked Semyon with a scowl, "Do you have something to do here?" The servant's scowl had no effect. Semyon was accustomed to peasant interference in the city. His temperament differed from that of the landowners. He seemed either friendly or indifferent to the major social problems they faced. And despite the social difference between them, Semyon responded calmly, his tone highly polite. "I want to go back and talk to your daughter about what happened yesterday. I do research and study the supernatural." The boy's simple manner of speaking contrasted with his luxurious attire, and Iulián felt disarmed. Changing his expression, he replied, "Did my boys tell you about the—" "Yes, about the spirit. By the way, don't blame them for this. They didn't do it on purpose. I already knew the story of the farm ghost and questioned them. Mayra won't be able to tell you anything. She only saw a spirit and had a nervous fever." Okay. See you soon," said Semyon, leaving. Iulián Sumarokov said goodbye to the professor and returned to his work, deep in thought. He couldn't stop the professor from talking to Mayra. He was a kind and polite man, seemingly sincere and interested, and would later become her teacher. Perhaps he had the means to drive the ghost from the farm? 18 Mayra Sumarokov, medium. Mayra was at that enchanting age when one begins to discover the world around one and identify it as one's own. She was born with heightened psychic abilities, and her sensitivity left her in a profound state of euphoria or infinite sadness. She contemplated everything with rapt attention. Kadienka showed her special affection, sparing her from Pavel's mistreatment. Because of their mother, he had harbored an exaggerated jealousy of his sister, a feeling that had softened thanks to the kind girl's advice after their mother's disappearance. There was no longer any reason for jealousy, but deep down he believed that the girl and her brother, Christian, were the cause of their mother's death. Despite his father's explanation, he harbored this resentment in his heart, linking them to the irreparable loss of their mother. Spiritism later brought to humanity an explanation of phenomena after death, such as the appearance of spirits, whose influence on the material world was not yet known. The man who would come to codify and explain these teachings was about to begin his studies. The ghosts, however, were in a hurry, continuing to torment people and places. The lack of explanation didn't actually prevent them from existing, and people weren't exempt from being victims of apparitions and communications with the afterlife. Semyon Andreevsk, a profound researcher of these phenomena, was so interested in them that he began to write some important notes, which he submitted to the judgment of his teacher, Dmitry Neighbor. Holy Russia was a breeding ground for mediums and ghosts who appeared and disappeared, disturbing the superstitious, who associated their appearance with bad omens, and those who saw them were despised. Ignorance dominated the Russian people, because religion, without explaining the passage of death and fixation of spirits in the invisible realm, increased credulity and superstition, avoiding any commentary. Such an attitude only fueled the anguish of a people already so suffering. Semyon did not fear ghosts and would even welcome one appearing to him. Despite his refined appearance and affected manners, a product of his upbringing, he was a keen observer, striving for perfection. Attracted by the simple life of the peasants, He enjoyed observing them, drawing conclusions that, after writing them down, he would show to his master, Dmitri. The two would spend hours talking and discussing these subjects, including the most important one, serfdom, which had not been completely eradicated and was one of the reasons for superstitions. In short, it was Russian life, steeped in legends and superstitions. It was never known whether the stories the mujiks told around a campfire, passed down from father to son, were true or imaginary. Simeon was more interested than ever in that new fact, even though he realized that Iulián didn't approve of his idea of looking for the girl. At the Norobod mansion, the matter was catching fire, also attracting the attention of its residents to the fenced Izba 19, Mrs. Norobod and Mayra. The vision that Mayra had managed to arouse great interest in the real grandparents and uncle. For Professor Simeon, there was another kind of interest. It was a wealth of material for his research. Mrs. Norobod, on the same day she learned of the fact, also went to the Izba, taking Sasha with her, the wealthy woman. Despite the lavish but crime-ridden life her husband provided her, was generous, a quality she had learned the hard way from sharing so much in the suffering of her servants. Hearing and seeing the mistreatment her husband inflicted upon them, she became empathetic. It was so cruel that she felt it firsthand. She understood that her marital unhappiness was a consequence of the insane acts of her husband and his overseer. Mrs. Norobod, devoid of prejudice, found great relief in talking with the poor peasants, who, besides suffering from their inferior condition, lacked many material things. Despite knowing that happiness does not depend on material comfort, she secretly sought to alleviate the suffering of one family here and another there. Her husband's constant state of drunkenness made her free and in control of her actions. In the afternoon, when the sun is almost disappearing, leaving a red glow on the horizon with orange hues, shadows appear, enveloping the earth in a mysterious atmosphere capable of exciting the imagination. He had seen the peasant girl from afar. Her hair, golden and blonde, like ripe corn, caught his attention. Sumarokov had made it absolutely imperative that his children not play near the mansion, and that they continue to respect the restrictions he imposed. Mrs. Norobod had not yet spoken to Iulián's children, despite being allowed to attend classes with her granddaughter. Sasha was a lonely girl, with no children around to play with. She was anxious to meet the girl who had seen her daughter's ghost. So many peasants had seen Sasha's ghost, but the servant's daughter had fallen ill because of a spirit. Perhaps the priest would find a way. It had been a while since she had invited him to the exorcism and celebrations. She needed to call him again. With these thoughts, Mrs. Norobod entered Sumarokov's house for the first time. Sasha, familiar with everything there, let go of her grandmother's hand and ran into the hut, looking for Nikolai, her favorite playmate. Katienka came to greet her, solicitous, guessing the reason that had brought her there. Mayra was still lying down. The two women discussed the incident and other matters concerning the work. Mrs. Norobod expressed her wish. "Take me to the girl's room. I want to see her." "You can enter the room." Iulián was arriving from work at this very moment. "Oh, Mrs. Norobod, what a pleasure to see you in our Izba." "Sumarokov, I came to meet your daughter." The man shuddered, but controlled himself. Whatever God wanted, sooner or later, this would happen. Our Mayra has been feeling a little sick, even today. She's not feeling well. Maybe I can help her. I have a lot of medications at home that Alex brought from the city for various ailments. She was listing the illnesses corresponding to the remedies as they entered the modest room. Mayra lay asleep, her blonde hair the color of ripe cornflowers spread out. Mrs. Norobod, upon entering, felt inexplicably moved, as if she were once again in the presence of her beloved Sasha. "My God! For goodness' sake, Lord, it is a living image of my Sasha. By the Immaculate Lady of Heaven, how they look alike!" Emotion drove her to a fit of tears, sitting next to Mayra, who remained asleep. Mrs. Norobod, uncontrollably, swept her up into her arms and held her in her arms, sobbing deeply. It was as if she were embracing her unfortunate little daughter at that age. "What a beautiful girl you have, Sumarokov," she managed to say between sobs. "She looked so much like my Sasha when she was this age, the same hair color, the same eyes." I'd love to see her in the light. The bedroom window was very small, enough to illuminate only certain areas during the day. Mrs. Norobod couldn't quite see the color of her eyes and examined the girl meticulously, as if trying to discover something in her, something that eluded her understanding. Therein lay the solution to the mystery of her granddaughter's disappearance, who was certainly the same age. Mayra, startled, woke up to confusion around her. "How old are you, my daughter?" "She will be 6 years old," Iulián replied, regretting his decision to come and live on the farm. Christian arrived from the yard with his little dog in his arms. His presence diverted the conversation, and Sumarokov seized the opportunity to divert the woman's attention and avoid answering the questionnaire. He didn't feel comfortable lying and omitting certain dates. He took advantage of the boy's arrival to get the woman out of the room. Christian, leave the dog outside," his father ordered forcefully. Christian obeyed immediately, releasing him. Seeing the important visitor, he felt shy and hid behind Katienka, who was standing beside Mayra's bed. The two siblings were almost the same age and looked nothing alike. In fact, Anna and Iulián's children, despite their differences, always had one trait in common: their parents' trademark, whether in their mouth, nose, eyes, or mannerisms. "Your children seem to be about the same age, Sumarokov. Which one is the oldest?" Mrs. Norobod asked, never taking her eyes off the girl, who was now nestled in bed, embraced by Christian. "You're right, madam. They were conceived very close together. Christian is very mature for his age." They chatted about trivialities. The woman felt so comfortable there with them, but she was called away to her duties at the mansion. "Well, I have to go," she said, getting up, "since the girl is fine and doesn't need anything. I'll be back tomorrow. I want to see her running and playing, and I'll send her some supplies." Before leaving, she hugged Mayra, moved, as if she were hugging her own little daughter. Immense happiness flooded her. It seemed to her that, in that humble hut, she was leaving all her treasure. "Where are you, Sasha?" She looked for her granddaughter. Sasha was with Nicholas and heard her grandmother calling her. "Let's go. Thank you for your visit, Mrs. Norobod. You are always welcome." "Thank you, Iulián Sumarokov. I haven't been so happy in a long time. Your children are adorable. They brought joy back to us. You and your family are welcome." An emotional bond was established between them, and Mrs. Norobod, bridging social divides. Loneliness and pain are silent teachers in training and uniting hearts. The meeting was inevitable. Iulián had prepared himself. Sooner or later, someone would see his Mayra. He could no longer hide her. He resigned himself to it. What was the point of looking alike? No one knew his secret, but God. Anna wouldn't return from the dead to tell him, and he would never reveal it. No one, absolutely no one, would force him to tell. Mayra was his and Anna's daughter, and that was that. Mrs. Norobod took Sasha by the hand, and they both walked along a path that led to the mansion. Her face, previously sad, her gaze dull, now had a different glow, as if she saw her daughter. She was so excited and happy that she seemed to have returned to her youth. She returned home so quickly that Sasha found her grandmother strange and struggled to keep up with her. The woman went into the house, determined not to mention the incident to Norobod, who seemed somewhat detached. She feared that meeting Sumarokov's daughter would worsen his delirium, leading him to drink more heavily. Her joy gave her strength, and her husband had no idea the reason for his wife's sudden happiness, although he noticed her change. Norobod only knew that his daughter's ghost was there again. In fact, it had never disappeared, and now it was attacking Sumarokov's daughter. He hoped that because of this, he wouldn't leave too. 20 the Devil is not as handsome as he is portrayed. The days on the farm remained the same. Hard work, employees with ugly faces, working reluctantly, underpaid, and poorly treated. There was no hope of a new harvest. Sergei, jealous, did not look kindly on his landlady's frequent visits to the house of the peasant Sumarokov. He swallowed it in silence and sometimes poisoned Norobod, saying to him, "Sumarokov is an expensive employee, Norobod. I know, Sergei, when this harvest is over, I'll dismiss the professor. I'll make an excuse." Norobod thought he was referring to Semyon's high salary. It's not about the professor, but about Sumarokov. If you visit his izba, you'll see the luxury he enjoys, thanks to the favors of your wife, who tirelessly provides him with a plentiful life. Norobod had already downed half a bottle of vodka, oblivious, but he looked up at the overseer. Don't tell me, Sergei. I don't know anything about my wife's behavior. Go check it out and take the opportunity to visit the fields. Norobod was trembling, his health was failing, and he could barely stand on his feet. His condition had worsened in recent days. Tomorrow I will go. Sergei was already familiar with that attitude. Norobod didn't seem bothered by anything. The overseer left grumbling. Why don't you die, you old fool, since you're no good for anything? If Norobod heard, he paid no attention. They shared many guilty feelings, including Sergei, the only one who could give him information about the whereabouts of Sasha's offspring, his unfortunate Batuchka. Since he didn't know what happened to his granddaughter, he lied to her and said she had been killed during the escape. Ah, unhappy night. I will never know peace again. Sasha, what have you done to your father? Where are you, my child, that I cannot see you? Come, at least your ghost, which saddens me but stays with me. Come. Norobod, without suspecting it, was attracting and keeping imprisoned the spirit of Sasha, who, through this constant evocation, could not find the strength to take the flight necessary for his own liberation. Both suffered. Old Norobod was a picture of imbalance, and his behavior created a terrible atmosphere of desolation and revolt around him. When Sasha appeared, the poor victims of the farm followed her, some barbarously sacrificed by her will, combined with Sergei's wickedness. Everyone shunned his company. His drinking worsened his condition. The children feared him, and no one visited them. The employees were at Sergei's mercy. If any of them complained to the boss, it was time. Lost. Norobod was in the hands of Sergei and the vengeful spirits. Only Mrs. Norobod remained respectful, so as not to prevent the invasion of her mansion. Such was the muzhik's revolt. And if this happened, Sergei and his two subordinates, who remained on guard, would not be enough to stop them. 21 Kostia. In the rye fields of the farm, the reality was different. The muzhiks were talking animatedly, or rather, very angrily. Sumarokov listened to them without interrupting, weighing their complaints. Many were right. They carried within them the strength that gives life to the rural man who, though battered by struggle, suddenly finds in an attempt to change things the courage to face adversity, or, if necessary, give his life for an ideal. A man, still young, preserving his noble features, but very badly treated by his hard life, led the conversation, and everyone listened to him, as if in him lay the liberation from the bitter servitude of his children, of the Russian people. It was Comrade Kostia, who was beginning to emerge, inviting the muzhiks to join the cooperative system, in an attempt to improve their living conditions. He was an idealist, whose ideas appealed to the majority, though they were sometimes misinterpreted. However, his power of persuasion and his likability were winning new adherents to his ideal. Where did this young man get so many ideas that seemed like the salvation of Mother Russia? Kostia, however, was not alone. Behind him stood other revolutionaries who were not visible. Teachers, doctors, intellectuals, some sons of the aristocracy. Kostia captivated everyone with his speeches. He himself was the image of enthusiasm and vigor. His courage and intelligence shone in his eyes, portraying the unusual man who had come to discredit the old regime that shook the soil of Holy Russia. Their meetings were held secretly, covertly. No one suspected for the time being. Sumarokov also participated in these meetings. After these meetings, Sumarokov became even more revolted against this regime that exploited the peasants' labor and enriched their bosses. He knew how his friends were mistreated and discriminated against with no rights whatsoever. They were paid for food and an uncomfortable hut to live in. In winter, they had to beg for firewood and warm clothing, and the children of peasants never had access to school. The children grew up as illiterate and rebellious as their parents, while the landlords passed by smiling in their luxurious troikas, richly dressed. The worst thing was not the luxury they displayed, but the despicable treatment they treated the peasants as if they were animals. The landlords had full rights over their lives. They lived in slavery because they had no other option. Russians who were no longer fit for work, and sick children mysteriously disappeared. The most beautiful and healthy women were taken to serve the landlords and their most beloved subordinates. The 10-year term, established by local law, was the hardest time for the workers, who suffered complete assault on their human values. The revolt was so great that Kostia appeared among them, like a savior, Christ a redeemer. Worse than the poverty and tyranny of their masters was the betrayal of some, who denounced their own companions in their eagerness to win their master's favor. Sad occasions when the white soil of Mother Russia was dyed red with unjustly spilled blood. Many mujiks realized that Kostia was right and that his ideas constituted a sure roadmap to free them from that hellish captivity. They paid attention to his speech. Comrades, the son of a peasant has no right to education, grows up as a pauper, and dies like an animal. Shame plagues our land. Why? Is it fate? Is it life that wills it this way? No, none of these. It is complacency, ignorance, superstition, and fear that make us tremble and surrender to such an absurd regime that it cuts off our most cherished hopes. The lack of human dignity has turned Russians into slaves. We are the majority. Without our hands, the boyars cannot eat. Without our labor, they cannot build their mansions and palaces, travel, dress luxuriously, or use rich carriages for transportation. And the poor peasant has to build his own uncomfortable sleds and carts or, for lack of wood, skate on old logs, risking his life. Or worse, face the distances on foot, and our homes. At this point, Kostia paused. The silence was total. He continued, Comrades, the only way to change the situation and reverse this disfigurement is to unite around the ideals of those who have already begun to nurture within themselves the hope of social reforms. Forward, comrades. Let us arm ourselves with courage and faith. What can we do, Comrade Kostia, to get them to share more food with us? Interrupted a worker who had been listening attentively to the speech. All change requires the sacrifice of a few bold ones. I am willing to lead the first cooperative, which I will now explain. First, you must become aware of the horrors perpetrated on the soil of the Russian motherland, of the torture and cruelty to which our families were subjected. Which of you managed to reach the age of 10, with the right to a small izba and a piece of land as a guarantee of survival? There was general silence. No one had the courage to respond. Well then, have you analyzed the reasons why you didn't succeed? The mujiks stood with their heads bowed, not daring to look at Comrade Kostia, considering his observation to be correct. No one there had achieved the desired share. Sumarokov stood up and answered Kostia.